Welcome to Curious Life of a Childfree Woman, a podcast celebrating unconventional choices and asking curious questions through the lens of a happy, child-free life. Every week, I chat with experts on today's most interesting topics, inspiring us to think differently, live intentionally, and find fulfillment on our terms. Whether you're child-free or seeking a space where parenthood isn't part of the conversation, you are welcome here. It's not about comparison, it's about possibility. Let's get curious together. AI is absolutely everywhere. Chat, automations, image generation. It sort of feels like this technology just got here, and it also feels like there's nothing it cannot do. Whether you use AI daily or you are still secretly trying to avoid it, I think we're all starting to wonder what this means for our future as individuals and as a society. That's why I am so excited to talk with Jordache Johnson. Jordache is an AI strategist and the founder of Never Tech Behind. He helps entrepreneurs and organizations build what he calls AI first cultures without losing what makes us human. He's developed frameworks that make AI feel approachable instead of overwhelming, and he's passionate about making sure no one gets left behind as the pace of change speeds up. Welcome, Jordache.
Thank you so much, Emily. I'm super excited to have this conversation today and look forward to hopefully add some value to your listeners.
Okay, let's start with sort of the history of AI if we can. I
Yeah.
feel like this really came onto my radar in a big way in 2024. I know that it's been around for a lot longer than that, but it seems like in a really short amount of time, it's gone from like, what is ChatGPT to almost everybody I know having at least tried AI. Some people are building whole businesses around AI. I feel like things are happening so fast. So can you kind of help us understand really what AI is and
Yeah.
how it has been developed to this point?
Great question. I'm so happy we're starting here. November 30th, 2022 was when ChatGPT came onto the scene. I was talking about that's BC, right? So that's before ChatGPT kind of thing. But set the scene real quick. What a lot of people don't realize is AI has been around since about 1949. And so that's when it kind of started, right? And we can go back to the Dartmouth meeting with the individuals who coined the term artificial intelligence. I think it was in 1951 or something around there. I always start there because I want people to understand, like, we've been living with AI for decades. Okay. Now, I won't go through the whole history, but there was kind of like an AI, we call it the AI winter in the late 70s, 80s. And fast forward now, the internet came on to the like public in the mid 1990s. Okay. And one thing I always want to preface with this as well is when we talk about ChatGPT, when we talk about Claude, when we talk about Gemini, this is a form of generative AI. So Gen AI, if you've ever heard of that term before. Okay. And so that is like a subset of a subset of a subset of this whole AI universe, right? So we have like the AI universe, we have machine learning, we have deep learning, and then we have generative AI is kind of a subset of that. So when I say AI, this whole world has been around for decades. Now, what's happened over the last 2 decades, which led us up to this to where we're at today, is around the 2000s time frame was when kind of the internet really took off. We call it like kind of web.2, right? And what do I mean by that? You think about all the social media things came on, blogging was coming on, YouTube was founded in 2005, right? And so during that time, what happened? People were starting to create a whole bunch of content. Content creation was kind of started. Okay. Now think about that in that same time frame. We had this thing called the iPhone that came on the scene in 2007, right? We had cloud computing starting to be formed, right? Google Cloud, AWS. So we had all these kind of other technologies that were being born, which was kind of the beginning stages of where we're at today. Because if you think about where we're at today, when you look at OpenAI, you look at Anthropic with Claude, you look at Meta with Llama, whatever it is, those foundational models, which what we call those, they were basically scraped the internet. They were grabbing a whole bunch of data to train these models. But that data would never existed if we didn't have content, if we didn't have cloud computing, we didn't have these big data centers that kind of led us to this point. Now, I'm going to fast forward. So that's 2000. They'll call the 2000s. Now, in 2017 was when Google DeepMind, which was the research arm at the time, dropped a paper around this concept of transistors. Okay. And I won't go nerd on you, but basically,
I like it.
in the mid 2000 or in the 2010 to 2020 range, this whole concept of neural networks came on to play. They're like, how can we get computers to think like our brains work? How do they get the neurons firing and connecting different information to draw conclusions? And that's kind of what the research that was happening at the time. And so Google DeepMind dropped this paper. This is the T in GPT, the transit. This is that whole concept of GPT, right? And so that was the foundation, what's been able to explode onto the scene when ChatGPT dropped. The thing I always tell people is like, when I say we've been living with AI for 10, 15 years, like using products, if you've ever watched Netflix, if you've ever shopped on Amazon, if you remember in the early days of Facebook that was said, hey, if you know this person, do you know this person? Netflix is like, hey, you watch this show. Do you want to watch this show? Amazon's like, hey, you bought this. Do you want to buy this? All these recommendation engines, this was all running on AI. Now, not Gen AI, but a form of machine learning and deep learning. But when that GPT paper dropped in 2017, that's what's really started building out this T in the transistors. And mind you, OpenAI actually started in 2014 or 15, right? They were a nonprofit. So it's all these little incremental building up to the point of when they launched ChatGPT in 2022. Now, why a lot of people think that's when AI started, it's because that was the first time us as consumers could tap into that technology very easily, right? That was the first, it was a chatbot. It was an interface. Anybody could log onto the website, start interacting with AI. Before that, you would have had to be a very smart person with some machine learning, computer science, etc., to start being able to understand how can I utilize these foundational models. So we've been living with AI for a while. Now it's just front and center, and it's available to any consumer that's connected to the internet right now. And that's why we feel like when AI started was when ChatGPT dropped at that point in time.
You blew my mind with 1949. Like, I can't believe, because you're so right. Like, now that we have access to it, we're like, whoa, like new invention in the 2020s. But of course, I mean, we can intellectually understand that there's probably a lot of background that leads up to that.
I got my master's degree in technology commercialization, right? So it's like 15 years ago, whatever it was. And the concept, it's like history doesn't repeat itself, but it leaves patterns. And we have this thing called this technology adoption curve, right? Which is like how technology becomes commercialized, meaning how can like people start utilizing it in a very simplistic way. But it's the same thing that's happened. Think about the internet. The average person was able to start connecting to the internet in 1995, 1996, 1994 timeframe. The internet was being used by the governments in the 1970s. Right? That's when it will start. So it's like, just because like when we as consumers start utilizing technology, it's been utilized for years behind the scenes, whether it was in government, whether it was in research labs, whatever. The foundations were being built to make it an easy user experience that now we can use as the average user. The big difference, I would say, though, is history leaves patterns. But with AI, the world that we live in today with social media and all these other algorithms and how information spreads, this is probably one of the fastest adopted technologies we've ever seen. It's being adopted faster than the internet. And it's just because more people are online. We have computers in our pockets now, right? We didn't have an iPhone in our pocket in 1996 when we could log onto the internet and communicate on the internet, right? Or send emails in the late 90s. But now it's like we've been so connected over the last 10, 15 years. Now, this is why ChatGPT got 100 million users in 3 months. It took TikTok 9 months. It took Instagram 2 years to reach those numbers. And that's just the world that we're living in right now.
Okay, that immediately brings us into what I really want to discuss in this conversation, which is kind of the pros and cons of this, like the upside and the fears that people are experiencing. And when you said that, like Netflix recommending shows, we love that, right? Like there's so many pieces of AI that we didn't probably realize were AI, but we've enjoyed the conveniences and the ease they bring to our lives. Then we hear you say something like that T in GPT, which nobody even knows what this stuff stands for yet. 100 million of us were like, we'll do it. And I want to get to the ethics of that too. But like, what you described is like making it more like a human brain. That's where we get really nervous. So one of the terms I like, you kind of describe this as a cultural shift. You use the word culture a lot. Can you explain more by like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So I always like answer this on the consumer level and then also inside of a business as well, right? And that's what I do a lot of work with organizations. But when we're talking like a cultural level, like on a consumer base, you have to think about we expect convenience now as consumers, right? I go back and I joke around. I remember when I used to print out MapQuest directions, like literally print them out
Me
to
too.
be able to get before GPS came around, right? And I can use Google Maps and MapQuest or Waze and Apple Maps now. And I just do that all the time because I expect that I can see that. But now I expect to be able to tell me where traffic's, like where there's backups, and I can reroute my path and all that. So we expect this stuff because we've been living with this stuff so long. So it's like we always want to figure out how can we do things easier, faster, with less effort, right? Like that's on across all different spectrums in a consumer life. Now with AI coming in play, there's so many benefits of it right now, right? Like how we can learn. And I'll just give you an example here. Like whenever, if anybody's bought an online course or is in a mastermind or membership or whatever, like Emily, you're an expert in something, right? If you were teaching me your expertise, I had to sit there, watch your videos, go through your course, listen to your videos, understand the expertise that you're teaching me. And then once I understand what you're talking about, I have to, I always say, cross this bridge where it's like, okay, now what Emily taught me, how does that apply to my life? How does that apply to my situation? I have to translate what you're telling me with what's going on in my world because you don't know what's going on in my world.
Mhm.
That's why a lot of people didn't finish online courses, because that bridge is a lot of effort. I have to watch a video, translate to my world, and then apply what you're teaching me in this. With AI right now, it can help cross that bridge. So I can say, give me what Emily's teaching me. Here's my situation. How does this apply in my own personalized thing? So this is where AI can personalize learning, can personalize knowledge gaining, whatever it may be, right? And that's like a one use case I use all the time, right? So
Uh-huh.
this is where it's like, now I expect that as a consumer. So this is that cultural shift where our expectations are being shifted, where you can't just sell me a course now. You need to sell me a course and make it easy for me to adapt it to my situation. That's just one example of it as well. If you're creating a tool or if you're offering a service or whatever it is as a business owner, you have to understand where consumers' expectations are. Our expectations are only getting like harder to please because we just expect things in an easier way where I have to do less effort and get the same result, if not better results. And so that's where we have to understand, like, as a consumer, we have a lot of power, no matter what anybody tells you as a collective, but on an individual level, it's a little bit more difficult. But that's where we have to understand, well, what are we giving up to have that convenience, right? What are we giving up to be able to do that, right? If I sit there and I'm watching Netflix and they're judging me based off what I've watched, I'm telling them a lot of information, not just the shows I'm watching, of how my thinking is, what my interests are, what am I curious about, what time do I watch, when are my, like, there's so many data points that you can collect just by understanding what I watch. But the thing I always tell people, this has been happening for decades. Once credit cards came in place in the 70s, they've been tracking our buying. What do we buy? When do we buy? Where do we buy? All your cars that have anything that's connected or software tracking how fast you drive, when do you drive? Like, so there's data points being collected on us on our everyday life all the time, whether we realize it or not, and these tools that we use. But now with AI, the power that this technology can do is a power that we really haven't seen before. And that's kind of where the fears come into play. But from a cultural standpoint, we just expect convenience. And that's what these companies are providing to us. And we just got to understand the pros and the cons of that.
Mhm. Do you think there's an inflection point where that craving for convenience ultimately becomes harmful to us, like as humans, as the animal, the creature that we are? And you're so right. Like once we've experienced something, you can never,
You don't want
seemingly
to go back.
never pull back.
Yep.
Yeah. I have a brand business. We do websites. If a video takes 1 second to load,
Yep.
unacceptable. Like
100%.
people will click away. And everyone talks about our attention spans getting shorter and it's harder to capture people. ADHD, all of these things
Yep.
that are happening. Like once you have an easier, as you said, like easier, faster, less effort way to do something, you don't want to go back to making it harder. But is there a limit to that? Like, are we going to make things so easy, convenient that we're almost obsolete?
Good question here. I'm always a big proponent of, has there been any other time in our lifespan that this has happened? Or can we draw from parallels from history, right? We can learn a lot from history. If you look at social media, right? Let's just talk about social media here for a second.
Hmm.
I personally, deep down in my bones, I don't think social media was developed for the harm that it's caused to society. I really don't. Maybe this is my optimism, but I think there was good intentions with the creation of social media to connect with people and all this other stuff. But if we look over the last 15, 20 years, there's been a lot of damage done to mental health and to our society and to information and disinformation and all the other stuff that's come into play with social media. And I think I always say there's always a dark side to technology, right? And I don't think they were aware when they started. I think that at some point people were aware that the tools that they were creating, they could do some harm. Whether they took action on that or not, that's up for debate. Now, if we take that same concept and think about with AI and from a convenience standpoint, yes, at some point there may be a point in time where like, well, what am I even doing with my life? Like everything's just done for me, right? Like I got robots folding my laundry. I got that's food showing up. I don't even have to cook anymore. But so there could be some negative side to this, but there also could be some positive side, right? AI as today on, the date that we're recording this right now, we're not at that stage. But when you hear these concepts or these acronyms called AGI or SGI, which stands for autonomous general or artificial general intelligence and super general intelligence, that's when we start thinking about where these AI tools and these models can expand, like are thinking better than humans, right? And there is some risk, definitely from societal risks to geopolitical risks and all these other risks associated with that. And there has to be guardrails put in place, which is where I think a lot of these foundational models are trying to get to, where they're working with governments and all the other stuff. But from a human behavior standpoint, yes, I think we're going to look back and there's going to be studies done with cognitive thinking, like our critical thinking skills that we've been building up over our lifetime. And that's when I think about, like, when I'm thinking about my 4-year-old or my 5-month-old right now, it's like, are they going to be able to build the same critical thinking skills that I built in my lifetime? I was born in the 80s, so I grew up with the internet. I was in college when social media came in. But like, you even look at the generation behind me, that they were born when social media was already there. They were born with iPhones. That's just how they live. So it's like there's going to be some shifts, I think, in our physiological makeup as humans, because we just don't have the skills that older generations had that we have now that can with technology, because it makes it easier for us. Now, that's not always a bad thing too, though, because if you think about human evolution, like, we used to have to go hunt for our food. Now I can press some things on my phone. I have food delivered in 30 minutes to my house. Is that a bad thing or not? I don't know, but I'll tell you right now, like, there's things I don't want to think about or make a decision on in my day-to-day life that causes me stress. And it's as simple as I hated going to the grocery store. But now I can just I can schedule a pickup and I don't even go get it delivered. I just go drive to the grocery store and they drop it off in my car. That's convenience for me, because I don't have to worry about going in the grocery store, walking around for an hour and a half, trying to figure out what I wanted, all that other stuff, right? So like, my point is there's always going to be pros and cons. The key to me, the thing that I always say is you just need to be aware of the downside, and you have to be aware of like even for me, as much as I live and breathe technology, I talk about, I help organizations with it. I still go on an hour and a half to 2 hour walks every day without any technology. I go out there and I'm still exercising. I'm still enjoying outdoors. I'm still making sure I'm just spending that time to think. Because for me personally, I don't want to offload all my thinking to technology as well, because I want to keep my mind sharp, right? And that's just like little things that you can think about in your day-to-day life. Is like, where's that line where I'm happy to use technology, but there may be a downside. But at the same time, it's like, I will never give up that part of my day-to-day life or my thinking, because I don't want to lose those skills. Because if you don't use skills, you're going to lose them. And that's just in every aspect of life.
This is so fascinating to me. I think about this so much, this line that we're talking about. And yes, like, this is about AI because it is this sort of exponential force that's happening. And it feels like this is something that sort of rivals our intelligence. Or you just mentioned like those other bigger models that will supersede our intelligence. When
Yep.
the washing machine came out, that wasn't really a risk, right?
Right.
Like, that was
Right.
clearly to solve one problem. And yes, like, there's so many examples. I mean, on this show, we talk about the history of women often, and, what it's like
Right.
to be a woman in society and what that means. And there's so many inventions that even made space for women to have the time to think about getting a job, because you don't have to bake every cake from scratch and you don't have to wash every shirt by
Exactly.
hand, So
Yeah.
there, of course, like, there's so much upside that we all embrace. And the stuff we do now, I get my groceries delivered often. I have every capacity within me to go to the store. I just don't like it. I'd
Right.
rather have them show up at my door. So yes, all this upside, but it's the human behavior piece. And I'm so glad you brought up social media. That's such a great, tangible example that we're all living in right now. And I feel like you and I are the same age, same thing. Like, I was born in the 80s. Facebook was very fresh when I was in college.
Yep.
So we sort of have this dual context. They always talk about with millennials that we've
Yep.
kind of had the best of both worlds, but we've
Yep.
had all these core critical thinking skills and core memories and experiences before the internet was really a thing.
Yep.
When we think about the future of the world, even though most people listening don't have kids, of course, I still care, like, what are we contributing to while we're on this planet, and
Yeah.
where's that going to go? So you mentioned some tactical tips there about how we can think about this from your perspective as somebody who knows this world so well. What do we do? What can
Yeah.
we do to try
Yeah.
to safeguard our mental capacity and, the things that really are so wonderful about being human?
I can just talk about some of the things that I do in my personal life as well as people in my network. First off, when you're utilizing any of these AI tools, ChatGPT, Claude, or any of these AI tools out here, like there's always terms of service, right? And I'm not going to tell you to go read the terms and conditions, and because no one's going to read that, right? And it's really, they're not even set up to be able to be a consent. It's basically a performance. It's a check the box exercise for these organizations, right? Because it's either yes or you don't use our service, right? And then you have to make those decisions. So one of the things that, I will tell you for me is like, I know like there's certain information in my life that I'm not putting into any of these tools. And I just know where that line's drawn, right? I'm not going to upload, doctor's reports. I'm not going to put my social security number in there, simple things like that, right? But, at the same time, I have an Apple Watch. I do my workouts. I track my workouts. I track my heart rate. I track all that other stuff. But I also trust Apple with my data because I trust that company because, they're a $2-3 trillion company worth or about whatever the valuation is. And the things that go through my mind is, are they going to put that whole organization at risk by leaking my information or using something in a nefarious way? And I've just made that personal judgment on like, I actually trust that, right? That's just where I do it, but if you look at a company like Facebook, they don't really have a good track record of utilizing our data effectively in a safe way. So you just have to like, there's certain brands personally that I'm like, I trust, I don't trust. And that's part of my decision process of what tools I'm going to use. The other thing too, though, is you have to ask yourself, like, when you're utilizing any of these tools or services or apps or whatever like this, is it truly serving my goals or am I using it just from a cool factor in it, right? And if it's not truly serving your goals, don't use it. Or is there a different way that I can get very similar results without using a tool that I'm maybe not aware of their track record with that? And the thing I always tell people with AI, and even this is just in business, is like, you don't have to have the latest and greatest to be able to get a lot of value out of that. Just because, and that's where I look at, there's literally hundreds of AI tools being launched every week and literally hundreds. And I look at some of these startups in these early stage companies. I'm like, I will not trust you with my data. You've raised $4 million. You've been around for 6 months. Not only that, but it's like, well, what happens if you get acquired? What happens with my data at that point in time? And I'll give you a perfect example. Who's done their DNA test with 23andMe?
Probably a lot of people.
Right. They went to bankruptcy and they got acquired by a private equity firm not that long ago. And so I remember like seeing that. I'm like, the only thing I have control over is going in and delete my data. Whether it's really deleted or not, I don't know. But like, that's something you have to think about, like the data that you're sharing, especially if it becomes sensitive information. You have to understand, how long has this company been around? You have to make those decisions. And that's the best thing I can tell you, because I know you have a lot of women listeners. When you think about it, for some of the things that women deal with, whether it's period tracking apps, beauty filters, all this other stuff, like that data can be used against you, whether it's targeted advertising, insurance discrimination, or if you're looking at, states that have restrictive reproductive laws and all this other stuff in there. Like, so you have to start thinking about like the data that I'm sharing. What is it like? Who am I sharing it with? How is it being used? How long are they storing my information? Are they sharing it with third parties? Whatever it is. And that's the stuff you just got to like, take control over versus just, blindly sharing my data left and right. So that's one thing that I'm always doing around like when I'm thinking about my data. Now, when it comes to like human behaviors and things like this, like there's things that I'm just like personally making choices on. And this is something that makes it difficult, I think, for some people, is because we have to be proactive now with this stuff. This is not just reactive, because we have A or B choice. I can read a physical book, or I can just go take a PDF, throw it into an AI model and have it summarize it for me and give me bullet points, right? So the question I'll sit here and say, okay, well, if I want to make sure that my reading comprehension stays on point, I want to make sure that I can think through things and things like that, I'm going to pick up a physical book and actually spend the time reading, because my goal is not to how many books can I finish or consume in a short amount of time. That's not the end goal. The end goal is, how can I think through books? How can I read through it? How can I take my time and actually understand the information, but also keep my reading comprehension skills built up, right? That's a choice I have to make, right? The same thing is with critical thinking and decision making, right? Yes, I'll use AI to help, kind of as a thought partner a lot of the times, to get me to
Mhm.
think through different things, because I firmly believe one of the biggest values of AI for me anyways is to get me to see things from a different perspective. If I'm thinking through a decision, well, what are the risks? What are things I haven't thought of? What are some other areas or another perspective with this, right? Because you have to
Mm.
remember, like, we're always making decisions from the context of what's in our mind, which means anything we've experienced in the past, our knowledge, like, it's in a box. So when they say think outside the box, it's hard to think outside the box if you haven't really truly had any other experiences to base those thoughts on, right? And so
True.
that's where AI can start giving you different ideas of like, oh, I never thought about that way. Oh, I was going to send this email, but oh, I didn't realize they could be taken that way. Or I'm trying to have a conversation with my wife and help her understand where I'm coming from. So I need to understand what are her thoughts. So it makes me a better communicator because it gets me thinking. I will never just say, hey, go write an email to my wife to convince her to, do all this stuff. I'm going to sit here and say, well, here's what she's thinking. Here's my argument. Here's her perspective. What are some different ways to help me think through this? So that's where I'm not truly offloading my thinking to these tools. I'm just using it as an assistant to get me outside of my mind, is get me thinking from a different perspective as well. And I've realized even over the last, 6-12 months, it's expanded my mind just thinking as a human of like, now
Mhm.
I'm different. Now I'm cognizant of thinking of from other perspectives. So it actually gets me thinking more because I've been using AI to expand my thought process at that point in time as well. The
Mhm.
negative is offload just my thinking and allow AI to make decisions for me, or not even think through it, just drop things in an LLM or a chat GPT or whatever, and just give me the result. And then I'm off to the races, not even thinking through what was the decision, whatever that. I will lose my decision making ability if I stop learning how to think through problems or problem solving and things like that as well. So that's where I'm always like, always thinking through, one, who am I giving my day to and how is it being used and all their stuff, but two, how do I augment my skills? How do I use AI as a partner, not as a replacement in my world, or in some of these core skills that I want to have as well?
Mhm. You're really highlighting the personal responsibility we all have within these tools, which I really appreciate. I think we need to hear that. And first, kind of thinking about the ethical side and the data and the privacy, it's a really good thing that you said all this. And even I was listening to like financial documents, medical documents.
Right.
When I think about convenience, those are the areas I wish I had more convenience. It's boring. It's
Right.
annoying, to go through all these like tedious things about ourselves and like I was at the doctor recently and they asked me about an immunization I would have had to have when I was like 20. And I was like, I don't know. Like, let me think back. What year was I 20?
Right.
So
Right.
it's like it's so tempting to be like, oh, let me just pop everything in and it'll store it for me or report it for me. But it's really on us to be conscious of these sources and what could happen to them. And then on the thinking side, I think so many people listening, we're of an age, we are of a certain social awareness where we need those reminders, but also like we can stick to this. Like, yes,
Right.
I don't want to let ChatGPT tell me how to talk to my husband. I don't let ChatGPT come up with the questions for this show. I want it
Right.
to feel human. Also, I enjoy it, which is a whole other piece of
It's
this and
another
maintaining
piece.
our self expression. But for the younger people and for teenage brains that aren't fully formed, who are, supposed to be writing a research paper and they'd rather play video games with their friends, do you see a world, or I guess, do you want a world where there's any kind of forced guardrail or like
Yeah.
protection or limits? Like, how do we protect ourselves for those of us that aren't sitting here
Yeah.
thinking, no, 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 I'll keep my critical thinking?
Right.
How do we protect everybody?
Yeah, that's a great question. This is the conversations happening on a federal level right now, and not even just here in the States, but in all the countries across the world. It's that fine balance between regulation and innovation, right? It's like we can't regulate it too much and stifle innovation, but at the same time, we can't just have it wide open because we know there's bad actors in the world that will take advantage of this as well. I'm personally in favor of there has to be some regulation into some form or fashion, right? But it can't be stifle regulation where it truly prevents the true value of some of this stuff as well. If I look back, if I was in high school right now, or if I was in college right now, and I'm like, I have this powerful tool called ChatGPT to write my papers for me or do all this other stuff. I think this is the conversation, and I've worked with universities and schools, and I've had conversations with them about this. You can't block it from them. These kids are going to get access to it one way or the other. The more you try to block it, the more they're going to use it, right? It's kind of like when I was growing up. It's like you're going to give me a curfew. I'm going to figure out a way to break that curfew kind of thing. And the harder you push, the more I'm going to push the other direction. Right. So there's that balance of that. But at the same time, you can utilize this. And I was having a conversation with the professor maybe about a month or two ago, and we were talking about like to get them to think through this, like instead of just telling them, hey, go use ChatGPT, etc. Like tell them to, yes, use prompts, use ChatGPT, but then explain their thought process of why did they use this prompt? What was the result? Like have them show their work, quote unquote, like we used to do with long division before calculators came into play. We had to show our work because that got us to think through, here's why I said this. Here's why I use this prompt. Here's the results with this. So I'm still utilizing those skills, but still leveraging the technology at the same time, right? And then the other side is, if you use AI and you get an output, analyze that. What was right? What was wrong? What were the things I had to change versus just put a prompt, get a result, copy and paste it, submit it. And that's where it's like, you can still inject opportunities to still build these underlying, human skills and these thinking skills by leveraging this technology. It's not a 0-1 game, right? It's not a binary game at this point in time. We were at a friend's house. They had an 8-year-old and a 9-year-old. And they were showing a Midjourney, creating images and all the other stuff with them, right? And it was fun because it was actually expanding their creativity and their imagination. Well, what else can I create? Can I go create this? Can I do it with this? Can I do it? Versus if I just gave them a book, they got a picture, right? That's all they got. So it's like, if you want to take the extra step, it's like, okay, use this tool, but let's talk about this. What else can it do? Why are you using this? So those are the skills that teachers can start injecting into their kids versus just saying, no, you're not going to use this, or go use it and you're not going to develop your critical thinking skills, reading comprehension skills, or whatever skills you're trying to build up, that we know are the foundational skills you need to live a successful, contributable life at this point in time. And one thing I was going to mention too, real quick, just to circle back, I forgot to mention this on the privacy side of things. So I think this is very important. When we're thinking about tools as well, one concept I always like to explain to people, if I'm using a ChatGPT or a Claude or a Gemini and I open up a web page and I'm just using it on my phone and I'm typing in the chat, I hit enter, that information gets sent to a server. They process that information and it gets sent back to me, right? That's where once I hit enter and it leaves my computer screen and it goes to a server, I've lost control of my data at that point in time, right? Yes, they can tell me all they want. They're not going to use my data to train AI. I have no way to prove it, whatever, right? It's a trust me approach. If there is information that I want to have that's a little bit more sensitive, but I still want to leverage the power of AI, this is where we use open source models. Okay. And so ChatGPT, Claude, etc., we call these closed source models, meaning that company controls the data. They control what goes in, what goes out. Open source, the nice thing about like an open source model, and it's not as easy to get started with it from a user experience, but I have it on my laptop right now. And what's the power of that is I actually download the AI model to my laptop and it's not connected to the internet. So I can have these conversations, but it's contained to my computer. The data is not going out anywhere. So I use it if I'm traveling, I'm on an airplane and the Wi-Fi sucks. I just open up my lab and I can have a conversation with an LLM that's downloaded on my computer, and that information is not being shared anywhere outside of my laptop. So there's still risk because it's on my laptop if my laptop gets stolen or whatever like that, but it's not going to a server where I truly lose control of it as soon as I hit enter. So this is where being educated on what tool am I using? Is it closed source? Is it open source? Is it still, because some open source can still be connected to the internet, but there's closed source that are cut off from the internet that are just locally stored on your computer as well.
Okay, how does that even work? How does it generate responses or like work with you if it's not connected to the internet?
Because you're downloading the model portion of that model. So and when I say model, think of it, the brain, right? So like ChatGPT, Claude, etc. Like these are the foundational models, right? It would cost them like about $100 billion to run a training set to train these models with all that data that model's being built on. So I'm not going to be able to go train my own model. Like it's economically unfeasible for that. But there's other open source models. So like there's two kind of primary open source models. There's Llama, which is made by Meta, Facebook. And then there's one called R1 or DeepSeek, which is made from a Chinese company.
Yes.
Now what happens then is, instead of me connecting open ChatGPT or Claude and hitting enter and their models running on their servers to process my request and send it back to me, I'm downloading an open source model to my computer. It's just running like a local, like any other, like iMovie would run on my computer. It's an app that's running on my computer, but then I have that model downloaded, and then it's processing it from that downloaded model on my computer. So it's not, that model's not stored on a server, it's stored on my computer to run the processes as well.
Okay.
Does that
Okay.
make
Got
sense?
it. It does make sense. I'm sure some people are like, oh my gosh, I'm going to do that like this weekend. And I'm sure some people are like, what? So,
Right, right, right.
it's a range, of course. And I feel like one thing that this is illuminating to me is we know that AI isn't going away. And
Yeah.
I feel like, yes, of course, we all want to take advantage of this, but things are going to change. Like you said, there's new things coming on the market by the hundreds every single week. Don't be scared. Don't be overwhelmed. We can explore this at the pace that we want to, which I
Yes.
think is important to remind people. Okay, so that brings me to another question, sustainability.
Yeah.
I care a lot about sustainability. We talk a lot about that here on the show. And of course, my algorithm knows this. So I get served this content that the processing power, the energy that's required to run a ChatGPT search. There was this thing going around the internet that said, like, stop using please and thank you when you talk to ChatGPT because it's sucking up all this extra energy just by you adding that. What is happening with sustainability, like the energy that this stuff requires
Yeah.
compared to what we're already doing with computers, with streaming and,
Yeah.
Google searches and all that? What's the difference?
Yeah, it's a heavy usage of energy to run these models and to process all these requests, right? And that's why you look at Microsoft investing in an old shut down nuclear power plant. You look at Elon Musk with his XAI company. They set up a whole thing in Memphis to run their supercomputers there for various reasons. So from an electrical grid standpoint or power standpoint, it's more powerful than some of these data centers that we're running to power the internet, which is what's happened with AWS and Google Cloud. Now, what I think about this is, as is right now, yeah, it's not like what's being used right now is not sustainable for, tens and multiple decades, right? That's not the feasibility of it, is how much energy this sucks. Now, this is where like the convergence of technologies come into play, right? Because we're going to look at alternative, energy sources that can help, do this. But I will tell you that with some of the things that we're seeing in real time, in a sense, is the way that they were building these models the last 2-3 years to get it to the point, and the more powerful these models become, that's not even like there are like these companies that are building them, the ChatGPTs, the Claudes, and all this other stuff. They're changing the way that they're building these models as well, meaning they're becoming less intensive the more powerful the model. So it's not a direct one-to-one relationship. If it's a more powerful model, it's going to be the exact same amount of energy that's required. What came to light with this was when DeepSeek got dropped at the beginning of this year, this Chinese company, and they came out and their white paper, their research papers, like, yeah, we trained this on 20 some $1 million, this whole model, versus hundreds of billions of dollars that, OpenAI was spending on this. And at that point in time, that week that it dropped, there was reports from trusted sources that Meta took 6 or 8 engineers that are like, you guys need to go reverse engineer what they just did and think through all this other stuff and break down what they did. And really, there was a way that they were using the algorithm to process information to make it a lot more efficient than traditional methods. So I say that on a high level, I truly think that the way that these models are going to be used are going to become a lot more efficient than what they currently are right now. I think there's going to be additional energy sources that AIs potentially even can unlock for us on a global level that we may not have been able to just from a lack of knowledge or resources. But I also think that this is always a conversation that we have to have. This is just as up there with the privacy thing, because from a longevity standpoint, and as these models become more powerful, we have to make it sustainable, or we've unlocked a technology that creates another an even bigger problem that we have. So I don't like, there's not a direct answer right now. I just see like what the direction some of these models are doing from a training standpoint, and being able to use it is becoming more efficient. And I think that these energy sources are going to be able to reduce the amount of energy sucked from the electrical grid that we're currently seeing right now.
Okay. That's interesting. And yeah, I try to remind myself. I was talking to my dad about this recently, and he was reminding me of supercomputers, when the first computer came out. And now, as you said, we all have a computer in our pockets.
A computer used to take up a whole room, right? And now, like, literally, if you look at what's in the iPhone right now, I always joke. I remember one of my friends early on, they got a gateway computer, and they were like, $3,000, $4,000 in the 90s, which was a lot of money at the time. And it's just like, it was this big chunky, like, and you think now, and you look at like the specs that we used to have, even the laptops I had in college, it's like my iPhone is like 20 times more powerful than what we used to carry around. So it's like, if we look at all technologies and things, they get smaller, they get faster, they get less, resource intensive. And I think we're going to follow a similar trend with AI as well, as it shifts to become more powerful to process this stuff.
Okay. So one more thing for us to all keep our eye on.
Yeah.
Make sure we're not out inventing ourselves of a
Yeah.
planet
Correct.
and our brains and everything that actually matters to us.
Correct.
Okay. I want to go back to this idea of self-expression because like what you were talking about with those like teenage kids or whatever and playing around with Midjourney, which is image creation. It reminds me of, did you ever play Roller Coaster Tycoon?
You got to build your own. You got to build your own theme park.
Yes. And
Yes.
that was like our creative outlet, right? Like it
Yeah.
was a super, now it would look so basic, I'm sure,
Right.
this
Yeah.
computer game. And it was like a disc that you put into the drive. And
Yep.
yeah, like my friend Rachel and I, we would sit there for hours. That was our slumber party activity.
Right.
So I like to think about ways that AI can help expand our way of thinking, expand our perspective, and expand the way we express ourselves. But I also don't want it to replace that. I
Correct.
just saw a meme on Instagram where, this guy was running through all these things like, can AI do my laundry? No. Can AI clean my house? No. And then AI is kind of like, well, I could paint you a painting. And he's like, but I like to paint paintings.
Right.
So, like,
Right. Right.
losing the things that we like to do for actual self expression. So,
Yep.
tell me more about that. Like, I think about this show, and, not that this is on the radar of anybody who's inventing AI, but like, will AI replace podcasters? Will it
Yeah.
replace news commentators? Will it
Yep.
replace influencers?
Right.
Like what's your take on that piece?
Yeah, and we've already seen, people running experiments with that stuff already, right? And I can't remember the exact data I just saw, but how like the percentage of data being created now on the internet, how much is AI generated and things like that as well. One of the things you said that's very important is, you know, there's things that I just enjoy doing that I'm not going to give up because I'm always going to keep doing that. I like to write. I like to read books. I like to, there's things that I personally do that I'm like, yeah, can I use AI? Yeah, but like, it doesn't give me the fulfillment of this. But there's a lot of things I don't like to do, right? And that's always the first question I'm asking. Do I enjoy doing this? Yes or no? Okay. Let's figure out a way that I can still get it done without me having to spend effort on this. So that's one thing. But I will tell you too, though, I've also realized in my own life how much more curious I've been able to become. And I think curiosity is a huge thing that we should like always keep front and center, because now I know that I can learn almost anything. I can build anything. I can code apps that I've never been able to build before because I'm not a developer to the extent where I can able to do that. So I'm like, let me just run some little experiments. Let me have a little project going on and let me just have fun to explore to see what's possible with that. So for me, it's increased my curiosity, or it's been able to bring me more enjoyment from a curiosity standpoint. Now, from like a human expression standpoint, people fall into one of two camps. If they haven't been doing that and now they can do that, that's a good thing. But if they've already
Uh-huh.
been doing this thing, podcasting, making art, whatever it is, they're like, oh my gosh, is this going to replace me? But then I sit there and I'll have conversations with people around this, and I'm like, well, let's talk about podcasting. What parts of podcasting do you enjoy and what parts do you hate? Well,
Mhm.
I don't like to come up with scripts. Okay. Well, use AI as your thought partner to help
Mhm.
come up with that and take that to relieve that, where you can still get the enjoyment of stepping up to the microphone and creating the content yourself and doing the stuff, versus the person that maybe doesn't want to be on camera. Well, do you want to use an AI avatar or 11 labs to clone your voice because you want to get the content out? I just hate having to get on camera every time to go do that. Well, that's a choice you can make at that. So I think it gives you the
Mm.
flexibility to find pieces of the process or workflow or whatever, where you're like, I don't like that part. I do like that part. I'm keeping this. I can figure out some AI tools or things to help me relieve some of that stress from the other part, which, if you, in the grand scheme of things, will allow you to create more, will allow you to enjoy the process even more, right?
Mm.
So I was actually speaking at an event. This was last year, and they had two artists doing live paintings near the stage while we were talking. And obviously, after my AI talk, they were like, yeah, we never use AI, blah, blah. And I was like, okay. I was like, why not? They're like, oh, we don't want to be replaced by blah, blah, blah. I'm like, that's fair. You're an artist. This is your living. This is what you love to do. But I would sit there and say, okay, well, let me ask you a question. When you're coming up with an idea of a painting, like, do you ever struggle with thinking through that process? Well, yeah, blah, blah. I was like, okay, well, have you ever thought about, you can use AI as a thought partner just to describe what you're thinking about, to give you different examples to inspire you to actually go create that painting? They're like, no, I haven't thought about that. I was like, okay, well, you can just drop into these mid journeys or any of these image creation, describe what you're thinking about, describe your thoughts that you have for this painting, and it may be able to open up, inspire you to do something in a different way, or inspire you to unlock something else. And that's what I
Mhm.
always look at AI is, it's like it can give you that aha moment a lot of the times, like, aha, I never thought about it that way, or oh my gosh, I've never explored that path. And it's like, that was a kernel that's like, okay, now that's going to unlock the seed for me to go back and do what I want to do, which is paint, have some different expressions in paintings or things like that, as an example. So that's where I'm like, AI will replace you if you wanted to do things, but it's like, this is where we have to be aware of what are the things I actually enjoy doing and what are the things I want to keep. And then how can I use AI to either help me expand my thinking, my curiosity in that, or take parts of that I don't like to do to be able to make sure that I keep the enjoyment. Because I know there's a lot of people that have tried podcasting, but stopped because they just didn't like the process, like parts of the process that would stress them out in their day-to-day life or in their weekly lives. So it's like,
It's not
remove
easy.
that. It's not easy, right? And so it's like, but there's parts of that workflow that AI can help out with where you don't have
Right.
to give up the humanness of it as well. And I feel like the media and social media, they want to try to paint this, it's either you use it or you don't use it. Either it's replacing everything or you're going to fall behind. And it's this gray area. And you have control to decide, where do I allow it to assist me and where do I make sure I keep my human aspects or my thinking or whatever it is at that point in time as well.
That is such a powerful reframe. I love the perspective that you gave there, especially for people who are scared or hesitant or, really have some real worries about this and they don't want to even dabble or explore because that kind of feels like you're acquiescing or giving into this thing that you're not sure that you believe in ethically. You don't really understand it.
Yep.
And if we can think about it as a tool that, first of all, is not going away, it's only going to get bigger and more robust and more diverse. If we think about it as a way to help us do more of what we love,
Yep.
that feels so much more exciting and just healthier than being in this state of paralysis or
Yeah.
fear that it's going to take us over.
100%. And one thing I will say too, though, is right now, up until this point in time in our world, in our lifetimes, especially as you get out of college and you start working, like our work becomes part of our identity. We identify with what we do and what we can create or what we can achieve, etc. And as this technology becomes more powerful, there's going to start having these more philosophical questions of like, what is the definition of work, right? Because if there's things that can do some of these tasks that I don't want to do, it's like, and this is where people get fearful, I'm going to lose my job or it's going to replace me. But the other side of the coin you can think about, it's like, it's going to allow you to be able to be more challenged and work on more challenging things, or be able to actually have the time where I don't have to be a 40-hour work week anymore, but I can still be compensated for my value and the skills that I bring, but I don't have to spend as much time on it. And then I can use that time elsewhere in my life to be able to do this. And there's a whole conversation you can go down that there's people out there creating content around right now around, universal income and all this other stuff at this point in time, because there's the economical side of things to this as well, right? And so that's really like, that's the fear that a lot of people have right now that I come across. It's like, it's going to replace me, it's going to replace my job, how am I going to make a living with the skills that I have? But this goes back to that personal responsibility side of things. It's like, every technology that comes online or comes in our world, there's skills that it replaces, but there's new skills that it unlocks and new opportunities that it unlocks as well, right? There's going to be things that this AI that unlocks that we've never had as a job or a task or something like this. But on the flip side too, though, it's like humans don't like change. And there's a reason, because change creates unknown in our world. And we want to have things that are known and safe, and we want to be this. But the reality that it comes down to this is, it's like, when you understand every time a new technology's come out, we've built in skills subconsciously and consciously, right? And so it's like, you have to be aware of like, okay, maybe this part of my job is going away, because technically all a job is, it's a box full of tasks, right? There's a lot of tasks that we do, and that creates a job. And if we can start saying these tasks are going away, or whatever percentage is, well, what does that unlock me to allow me to do now with that extra time that I wasn't doing this? There's more things. And these are the conversations I'm having a lot with the C-suites and board of directors, where it's like, you don't put AI in a company just to start cutting people. You actually got to sit here and say, what can I do with these resources now that we've unlocked? Do we need to create more widgets? Meaning, is there more demand for our widgets out there where we just create more of the same widget? Or is there new markets would come in, or new products that would come in? Because now we have a workforce that has excess capacity to start doing some things that we weren't able to do before. And so that's where it can unlock a lot of value versus just, oh my gosh, it's taken away. Now I'm only doing 60% of what I was supposed to do because AI is doing 40%. Well, yeah, you can stay in that mindset, or you can sit here and say, well, now, and this goes back to that curiosity mindset of like, well, I wonder what else I can do. Is there other skills I can use? Is there AI I can use AI to help me learn a skill in 6 months that it would probably took me 2 years before? Yes, the answer is yes. And so that's where that personal responsibility comes into play of like being aware of how do I continue to upskill myself, or being aware of what's happening so I can make sure that I am quote unquote future proof to be able to
Mm-hmm.
stay sustainable in this world that we're moving into. Cause like you said, the toothpaste is out the tube. It's not going
Mm-hmm.
back in the tube. Right. And that's just something that we just have to be aware of. And this is something I always talk about, because it's like a lot of people are just stuck in that fearful paralysis stage of like, I can't do this. It's going to replace me. It's like, no, it can support you. When I've talked with a lot of copywriters as well, and there's been a lot of concern in writing, and this
Mm-hmm.
can be applied to anything. It's AI, like if you know how to write, or if you're a developer and you know how to code, you've built those skills up, or you're a podcaster, you know what a good podcast is. Yes, AI can actually supercharge that, because what happens now is whatever AI gives you back, you know what's good, what's bad, what's great. Like, and it can
Mm-hmm.
actually speed up your process of the quote mundane work and actually unlock a whole new things, and it'll supercharge it. So I always say, if you're not good at a skill, AI can make you good. If you're great at a skill, AI can make you exceptional, because now you got the foundations of the principles in that skill set. If you're a writer, you know copywriting skills, you know how headlines should be, you know how copy design should be, etc. Or if you're a developer, you know how to make code efficient or whatever. But now you have AI at your sidekick. Now you can move faster and do things a lot more efficiently than you were able to do before, but still apply your same skill set as well.
Jordache, this is the right mindset. I am so happy you're here because seriously, like as individuals and as leaders, I love so much of what you said. And I just want to reiterate that for everyone listening, like embracing the supercharge of what's possible with this and being proactive to embrace AI publicly too. I still think there's a lot of people in my world of entrepreneurship who are using AI, but they want to keep it a secret. It feels like I'm cheating, I'm taking a shortcut. I certainly don't want my clients to know that I used AI to help me write an email to them. Like they'll fire me. They'll think I'm not
Right.
working hard enough or, paying enough attention to them, whatever. And it's exactly what you said. Like, okay, I used AI to craft this email back to you because I was able to spend more time doing the real critical work that you
Yep.
hired me for, or, those
Well,
that reframe.
100%. And I think about this, if as a business owner, if I hire a contractor to write emails for me, build a funnel for me, whatever it may be, and I'm gonna sit here and say, like, wait, you're not using AI? Because in my mind, as a business leader, I'm sitting here saying, the amount of time that it takes you to go craft an email, you probably could have wrote 3 emails, and the human in the loop to be able to come back in with your skill set to make sure that it is quality emails.
Mhm.
And so I got to sit here and say, like, don't hide it from me as a business. If I hire you, I'm like, yes, I want you to use AI, but use your human skills as well. I'm hiring you for your skill set and the strategy behind it and the value that you bring in your thinking that you're bringing. But I would rather have you give me 3 emails in the same amount of time you would do 1 email, but I'm still going to pay for your value and pay for your strategy and your thinking on that, right? Because I've hired you for a reason. Because at the end of the day, I don't care how the sausage is made. I just want a
Mhm.
good sausage at the end of the day, right? I
Right.
don't care if you've taken 10 hours to research this or whatever. My goal is, did you write me a good email in that example right now? It's funny you say that, because I had an agency owner, this was probably like 6 months ago. She's like, I feel like I'm cheating my client using AI. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, well, why? But I was like, you gave them quality work. They've paid for the work that you provided to them. You didn't just copy and paste something out of ChatGPT. Because if that could happen, your client would just use ChatGPT. And that's where a lot of business owners make the decision. Well, I'll just use ChatGPT. Why do I got to hire you? I'm like, because I'm not hiring you for the actual task of typing in the email. I'm hiring you for your knowledge and your understanding of copywriting, headlines, value, hooks, all the other things that, yes, ChatGPT could give me. But me, if I don't have that copywriting background, whatever ChatGPT gives me is the output. I don't know what a good hook is. I don't
Mhm.
know what a good headline is. You do as the expert in that area, right? And so that's a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people, especially service providers. But like, that's the mindset that you have to have. And if somebody's hired you and you feel like they're gonna fire you because you're using ChatGPT, it's like they may not be the right client for you at that point in time, because they don't value you as your skill set and your knowledge. They look at you as a task. You're just doing
Mhm.
the task for me, and I'm going to pay for the task versus your skill set and your knowledge.
Mhm. I think this permission to use this and own it and be knowledgeable about it is so important for women to hear. And I shouldn't even say this because I don't have the stat in front of me and I'll find it and post it. But I was reading something that was talking about how women have been, whether you're an entrepreneur or not, are slower to adopt this because we are conditioned that we want to work really hard. It is about the effort we put in. We're fearful that somebody's going to make assumptions about us, that we're
Right.
not giving it our all or that we're not working hard enough. So when something feels like a loophole or something, we're slower to embrace it, which will inevitably hold us back. And hearing you say that, it's like, yeah, that would be like me hiring an accountant who refuses to use a calculator because she has
Right.
so much pride in her ability to do the work long form. I don't
Right.
want that type of accountant. Like, just get it
No.
done.
Right.
And maybe
I
you'll
just
get
need it
twice
done.
as much done if you use a
Right.
freaking calculator.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I think just this permission for this
Yeah.
piece, again, no matter what our job is, or if we're using this in our personal lives, like this is a place, there's still room to get ahead and be
Yes.
innovative and be, as you said, future proof and forward thinking, which is a good thing.
Yeah, and I'll say this too, is like I left corporate in 2010, 2011 timeframe, right? So I've been running my own business for about 15 years now. And I remember in those first few years, we were ingrained in this whole hustle culture, right? The Gary V's, you got to hustle
Yes.
24/7, you got to grind, you got to do all this other stuff, you got to work hard. I had a coach tell me that he's like, "Are you getting paid for your effort or your output?" And I'm like, "Getting paid for my output." He's like, "So why don't you get it done as efficient as possible? If you can get work done in 2 hours and you only work 2 hours a day and you're offering the same value, like why are you sitting there working 8 hours a day on a client when you can get the work done in 2 hours?" And even in corporate, I don't even know the exact stat. I was talking to an individual. I think he said like the average worker in a company is only really working an hour and a half to 2 hours out of their 8 hour workday. All the other stuff is just filled in with different things, tasks they shouldn't be doing, whatever it is, procrastination, all the other stuff, because we're trained that we have to work a 40-hour week. We got to hustle. We got to grind. We have to show that we're doing something versus like, you're hiring me to do a job. And this is one of the big issues I had why I left corporate, because I was like, I figured out automations and things like this. I was doing my job in 2 or 3 hours. I'm like, why do I got to sit here in the office for 8 hours? And my boss told me like, you can't be the first one to leave. And I'm like, but my job's done, kind of thing, right? So that's a whole nother conversation, right? Even as entrepreneurs, like we are trained that you have to grind and you have to work 12 hours a day, 15 hours a day, to blah, blah, blah. And it's like,
Yes.
no, we don't. But that's just the cultural pressure that we have in the world that we've been living in. No, I want to make sure that if I want to go work out at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm going to go work out at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. If I want to go take a nap at 11 o'clock in the morning because my body's tired, whatever, I probably should go take a nap. You know why? Because if I try to fight through that task is going to take me 2 times longer versus if my mind's fresh, if my body's fresh, if whatever it is. I know everybody doesn't have that luxury, but like that's the point about this is like you have to work this amount of hours, because even if I hired a contractor, I don't pay them by the hour for this specific reason. If you get the
Yeah.
job done in 15 minutes or if you get the job done in 10 hours, I'm paying you this amount for you to get the job done. I don't care how I'm not paying you for the hour, because if not, you're going to stretch that out as long as possible to maximize the amount of hours I'm paying. I don't care if it's that long or not. And so that's the mindset that we have to, like, as a culture, I believe, have to get in this. It's like this whole concept of 40-hour work weeks or 60-hour work weeks or whatever, like we have to get away from that versus what value are you contributing to the company or the business that you're running, and do you have to spend the amount of time on that? And so that's where I look at like these technology, AI, whatever it is, that can unlock a lot of time that I can go use elsewhere where I'm not just stuck working on my business and still get the same, output and performance out of it as well.
Freedom. It sounds like so much freedom. And I
Yes.
love this. Maybe this is almost like a self-correcting. I've never thought of this before, but we know that the internet in a lot of ways has led to more work, longer
Yes.
days, a billion more emails, where if you had to type that out as a memo and walk it to someone's desk, was that important enough to send? Probably not. But
Right.
when you can shoot it off like on the treadmill and
Yep.
like you just do, and then
Yep.
somebody has to take the energy to respond. So the internet has added like our remote work, our ability to work on our laptop at home, all of this extra time to what used to be a more standard 40-hour work week. I almost don't know anybody who only works 40 hours a week these days.
Right.
So, yeah, like let's embrace this. I love the idea of more using this for freedom. And we were kind of talking about how can we be more efficient to maybe even get more done? And maybe it's also how can we be more efficient to have to get less done,
Right.
and just use
Right.
that time to have fun and do whatever we want.
Exactly. And one of the things like 5, 6 years ago, I remember somebody asked, "What do you do for fun?" And I'm like, I run my business. Like I just enjoy it. Like I have family and I run my business type of thing. And it's like, but it got me thinking, it's like, I just didn't have hobbies at the time. I wasn't going out doing, because it was like any time that I had extra, I was like, "Oh, I have to do this. There's a whole bunch of things I got to do on my to-do list or whatever it is." And I was putting all this pressure because I was still operating that mindset. To be successful in life, I have to work hard. Like how hard
Yes.
you work is a direct, correlation to the results that I'm going to generate. But that's so not true. It just comes back to, you don't have to work hard to be successful, right? But we've been trained, and this goes back to like the generations. We've been trained that you have to work hard, go to school, work hard, get good grades, work hard, get a good job, work hard, and then retire at 65. It's like, or we don't. And there's other options and there's different ways to do this. And it's like, I didn't start my business to work 2 or 3 times harder than in my corporate job that I had at the time, just to be able to have more work and be an employee in my own business. That's not what I started, because, and this goes back to there's lots of different types of freedoms you want in your life. And so it's just one of these things where this is where technology truly can unlock that, but you have to be in control of that, right? Like even for me, if you look at my iPhone, I don't get any notifications. I don't get Slack notifications. There's no notifications, because when I'm ready to communicate with somebody, I will go into that place and communicate. There's boundaries that I put in place in my own life where when I'm in my office, I'm online. When I walk out of my office to the rest of my house, I'm at home at that point in time. My laptop doesn't leave my office, because I want to make sure there's a clear barrier where this is not taking over my life. As much as I love technology, there's this barriers I put because there's different priorities I have in my life as well.
I'm so inspired. I'm sure everyone else listening is really inspired. I could clearly talk to you forever. So, to close this out for everybody listening, what is like one takeaway, one action step, if you could just like speak to people and have them know one key takeaway that you think is most critical for people to be considering now, what is that?
Yeah, we talked about, I would say, the dark side of technology today, and or the risk, if you want to think of it, and the things that we have to be aware of. But I don't want that to stifle people, right? And so one of the things, like, you have to embrace curiosity and experimentation. Those are like the two biggest things that I always tell people. It's like, there's not a right, if you use AI, ChatGPT, Claude, like, one, no one's going to see it unless you share it with you. So like, you don't have to feel like you're getting judged about how you do this. But there's opportunities for you just to start seeing what it can do for you, right? The way I look at my life is I have projects in all different aspects of my life, right? Projects in my life, in my business, projects in my relationship, whatever it is. And I always try to see, in this project, is there something that I could use an AI tool or technology that could actually solve this? And that's why I go run experiments. Let's just try this for a week and see what happens. If it fails, it
Mm.
fails. But I'm going to learn a lot of things along the way. So like, just be curious about what it can solve. I'll give you a specific example. I've done many different diets, keto, all this other stuff. I like to work out. I enjoy working out, but like, there's always the nutrition side that would always, stop me from doing something, meal planning, meal prepping, all this. I was like, this just isn't sustainable in my world. And part of it was because there's just foods that I don't like, that every diet was telling me, like, I don't like to eat nuts. I don't want to eat chicken every day. There's different things. So I remember, like, I basically is like, I just told AI, here's what I like, here's what I don't like, here's what I'm trying to achieve, here's the macros I'm trying to hit every day, the protein and the fats and the carbs every day. And it gave me a personalized meal plan, 2-week meal plans with what I could actually enjoy to eat. What are the things I can cook? What are the things? And then it gave me a shopping list, and I can just go put into my cart and on my app in my grocery store and get orders. So now I'm like, over the last 2 months, I've been able to actually get a lot healthier, because now I can combine nutrition with actually my enjoyment of working out that used to always stifle my sustainability. That was a project. I was like, I wonder if AI can actually help me develop a meal plan that fits what I'm trying to do, my goals, but also things that I enjoy doing. That's literally where it started. And I just started down the path from there. My point is, just be curious and experiment with this stuff.
Mm. And for everybody listening who currently sells meal plans, think of how much more personalized attention you could deliver if you're using AI to
Yes.
create the meal plans. Like, let's stay in that
Uh,
optimism zone, because that's such a
yes.
great example. There's so many things like that, and I'm glad you took that outside of work. We used it recently to plan a trip, and I don't enjoy having to sift through like every restaurant in a city that we're going to and try to figure out which one's close to where we're going to be and like what's the travel time. AI can do that in 2 seconds.
I'm
So,
telling you.
yes.
Yes. It's a great tool outside of work in your personal life as well.
Mm. Okay, Jordache, for everybody who loves what they hear and they want to know more about you or connect with you, tell the people what you have going on and the best place to find you.
The easiest way to, I always say, is just get on my email list. And what I like about that is I put a lot of my content out in the emails, and you can always just hit reply. and ask me a question, right? That's the thing I like about that. So if you go to jordache.ai, easy place to get on my email list as well. And then, Never Tech Behind, I have for the business owners out there, that's my membership where we talk about different aspects of AI and how to implement and integrate AI in your business. It's my little community that I've built out there. So that's at nevertechbehind.com if you're interested in that.
Perfect. We'll make sure all of that is included in the show notes. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. I have learned a lot. I really respect your work. I think your approach to this topic is really important, and I'm just grateful for what you do.
Oh, I appreciate that. It was a great conversation. I'm super thankful to have the opportunity to speak to you and your audience today.
Thank you for listening. Now I want to hear what you learned. DM me on Instagram at Curious Life of a Child-Free Woman, or leave a review with your top takeaway. These ratings really do make a difference. If you're not a member of the Curious Life Club yet, you are invited. Visit CuriousLifeOfAChildFreeWoman.com to join the conversation, share suggestions, and be first to know the next curious topic. I appreciate you, and I'll see you next week.